Whoever has good material for a story is grieved if the tale is not well told. Hear, my lords, the words of Marie, who, when she has the opportunity, does not squander her talents. Those who gain a good reputation should be commended, but when there exists in a country a man or woman of great renown, people who are envious of their abilities frequently speak insultingly of them in order to damage this reputation. Thus, they start acting like a vicious, cowardly, treacherous dog, which will bite others out of malice. But just because spiteful tittle-tattlers attempt to find fault with me, I do not intend to give up. They have a right to make slanderous remarks. I shall relate briefly to you stories which I know to be true, and from which the Bretons have composed their lays. After these opening words, I shall recount to you, just as it has been set down in writing, an adventure which happened in Brittany long ago. At that time, Lais ruled the land, which was as often at war as at peace. The king had a baron who was lord of Lyon. His name was Aridio, and he enjoyed the confidence of his lord. He was a brave and valiant knight, and his wife had borne him 2 children, a son and a beautiful daughter. The girl's name was Nogent, and the boy was called Guigemar. There was no more handsome young man in the kingdom. His mother cherished him greatly, and his father loved him dearly. As soon as he could bear to part with the boy, his father placed him in the service of another king. The young man was wise, brave, and loved by everyone. When the time came that he had reached the right age and maturity of mind, the king dubbed him nobly and gave him whatever armor he desired. He left the court, dispensing lavish gifts before he departed, and went off to Flanders, where one could always find war and strife in search of renown. At the time, no one could find his equal as a knight, be it in Lorraine, Burgundy, Anjou, or Gascony. But nature had done him such a grievous wrong that he never displayed the slightest interest in love. There was no lady or maiden on earth, however noble or beautiful, who would not have been happy to accept him as her lover, if he had sought her love. Women frequently made advances to him, but he was indifferent to them. He showed no visible interest in love, and was thus considered a lost cause by stranger and friend alike. At the height of his fame, this noble knight returned to his homeland to see his father and his lord, his loving mother and his sister, who had all longed for his return. He had spent a month with them, I think, when the fancy took him to go hunting. That evening he summoned his knights, his hunters, and his beaters, and in the morning went off into the forest, for hunting brought him great pleasure. They gathered in pursuit of a large stag, and the hounds were unleashed. The hunters ran in front, and the young man lingered behind. A servant carried his bow, his hunting knife, and his quiver. If the opportunity arose, he wished to be ready to shoot an arrow before the animal had stirred. In the heart of a large bush, he saw a hind with its fawn. The beast was completely white, with the antlers of a stag on its head. When the dog barked, it darted forth, and Guigemar stretched his bow, fired his arrow, and struck the animal in its forehead. Immediately the hind fell to the ground, but the arrow rebounded, hitting Guigemar in the thigh and going right through into the horse's flesh. He was forced to dismount and fell back onto the thick grass behind the hind he had struck. The animal, wounded and in great pain, lamented in these words, "Alas, I am mortally wounded. Vassal, you who have wounded me, let this be your fate. May you never find a cure, nor may any herb, root, doctor, or potion ever heal the wound you have in your thigh until you are cured by a woman who will suffer for your love more pain and anguish than any other woman has ever known, and you will suffer likewise for her, so much so that all those who are in love, who have known love or are yet to experience it, will marvel at it. Be gone from here and leave me in peace." Guigemar was seriously wounded and dismayed by what he had heard. He wondered where he could go to find a cure for his wound, for he did not intend to allow himself to die. He knew full well, and said to himself, that he had never seen any woman whom he could love, or whom could cure him of his suffering. He called to his squire, "My friend, ride quickly and bring my companions back, for I should like to speak with them." The young man rode off, and Guigemar remained behind, lamenting his suffering. He bound his wound firmly and tightly with his shirt, then mounted his horse and departed. He was keen to get away, for he did not want any of his followers to come and hinder him, or attempt to detain him. A green path traversed the wood, which led him out into an open space. There on the plain he saw a cliff and a mountain, and from a stream which ran below a creek was formed. On it lay a harbor, in which there was a single ship whose sail Guigemar could see. The ship was fully prepared for departure, caulked inside and out in such a way that it was impossible to detect any joints. There was no peg or deck rail which was not made of ebony. No gold and earth was worth more, and the sail was made entirely of silk, very beautiful when unfurled. The knight was perturbed, as he had never heard say that ships could dock there. He rode forward, dismounted, and in great Payne climbed aboard, expecting to find men in charge. But the ship was deserted, and he saw no one. In the center of the ship, he discovered a bed whose posts and side pieces were wrought after the fashion of Solomon, engraved with inlaid gold, and made of cypress wood and white ivory. The quilt which lay upon it was of silk, woven with gold. I could not set a price on the other bedclothes, but I can tell you this much about the pillow. No one who had lain his head on it would ever have white hair. The sable skin coverlet was lined with Alexandrian silk, and on the prow of the ship stood 2 pure gold candelabra. Even the less valuable of 2 was worth a fortune, in which were lighted candles. Guigemar marveled at all this, and in great pain from his wound reclined on the bed to rest. Then he rose, intending to leave the ship, but he could not go back, as the ship was already on the high seas, speeding quickly away with him, the wind favorable and blowing gently. There was no question of his returning to land, and he was grief-stricken, not knowing what to do. No wonder he was dismayed, for his wound was causing him great suffering, but he had to accept his fate, and he prayed to God to take care of him, to bring him, if at all possible, to a safe harbor and protect him from death. He lay down on the bed and slept, but by now the worst was over, and before evening he would have reached the place where he would be cured, below an ancient city, capital of its realm. The lord who ruled over the city was a very old man, whose wife was a lady of high birth. She was noble, courtly, beautiful, and wise, and he was exceedingly jealous, as befitted his nature, for all old men are jealous and hate to be cuckolded. Such is the perversity of age. He did not take lightly the task of guarding her. In a garden at the foot of the keep was an enclosure, with a thick, high wall made of green marble. There was only a single point of entry, guarded day and night. The sea enclosed it on the other side, so it was impossible to get in or out, except by boat, should the need arise in the castle. As a secure place for his wife, the lord had constructed within the enclosure a chamber of an incomparable beauty, at the entrance of which stood a chapel. The walls of the chamber were covered in paintings in which Venus, the goddess of love, was skillfully depicted together with nature and obligations of love, how it should be observed with loyalty and good service. In the painting, Venus was shown as casting into a blazing fire the book in which Ovid teaches the art of controlling love and as excommunicating all those who read this book or adopted its teachings. In this room, the lady was imprisoned to serve her lord that had provided her with a noble and intelligent maiden, who was his niece, his sister's daughter. The two loved each other dearly, and when the husband was away, the girl remained with her until his return. No one, man or woman, could have gained access to the spot or escaped from this walled enclosure. An old priest with hoary white hair guarded the key to the gate. He had lost his lower members, otherwise he would not have been trusted. He recited the divine service and served her at table. That very day, in the early afternoon, the lady had made her way into the garden. She had fallen asleep after a meal, and then gone with her maiden in search of recreation. They looked down towards the shore and saw the ship rising on the waves as it sailed into the harbor, but they could not see how it was being steered. The lady wanted to turn and run. No wonder she was afraid. Her face became quite flushed, but the maiden, who was wise and of bolder disposition, comforted and reassured her. They hastened towards the ship, and taking off her coat, the girl boarded the beautiful vessel. She found there no living thing apart from the sleeping knight. Seeing how pale he was, the girl assumed he was dead. She stopped and looked at him, then returned, called hastily to Our Lady, and gave her a true account. She lamented the dead man she had seen, and the lady replied, "Let us go together, and if he is dead, we shall bury him. Our priest will help us, but if I find him alive, he will speak to us." They made their way without delay, the lady leading and the maiden following. When she entered the ship, the lady paused before the bed. She looked at the knight and grieved deeply over his handsome body, which filled her with sorrow. She deplored the loss of this young life. Placing her hand on his chest, she discovered that it was warm and his heart sound, beating beneath his ribs. The knight who was sleeping awoke and saw her. Joyfully he greeted her, knowing full well that he had reached the shore. The lady, tearful and perturbed, responded to him politely and inquired how he came to be there, from what land he was, and whether he had been exiled through war. "My lady," he said, "that is not the case, but if you wish me to tell you the truth, I shall do so and withhold nothing from you. I have come from Brittany, and today I went hunting in a wood, where I shot a white hind. The arrow rebounded, giving me such a wound in the thigh that I think a cure is impossible. The hind lamented and spoke to me, cursing me and swearing that my only cure would be at the hands of a damsel. I do not know where she is to be found, but when I heard my feet, I hurriedly left the wood, saw the ship in a harbor, and foolishly got on board. The ship quickly sailed away with me in it. I do not know where I am or what the city is called. Fair lady, I beg you in God's name, please help me, for I do not know where to go or how to steer the ship." She replied, "My dear lord, I shall gladly help you. This city belongs to my husband, as does all the surrounding country. He's a rich man of high lineage, but he is very old and fearfully jealous. On my honor, he has imprisoned me in this closure. There's only a single entrance, and an old priest guards the gate. May God grant that he be consumed by hellfire. I'm shut in here day and night. And not once would I dare leave without his permission, or unless my lord asks for me. My bedchamber and my chapel are here, and this maiden is with me. If you wish to remain until you can travel more easily, we shall be pleased to shelter you, and will serve you wholeheartedly." When he heard these words, Guigemar thanked the lady politely, and said he would stay with her. He raised himself up off the bed, and they supported him with some difficulty. The lady took the young man to her chamber, where he was placed on the maiden's bed, behind a canopy which served as a curtain in the bedroom. They brought water in golden basins, washed his wounded thigh, then removed the surrounding blood with a fine piece of white linen and bound it tightly. They treated him with loving care, and when their evening meal arrived, the maiden retained sufficient for the night's needs, so that he was well supplied with food and drink. But love had now pierced him to the quick, and his heart was greatly disturbed, for the lady had wounded him so deeply that he had completely forgotten his homeland. He felt no pain from the wound in his thigh, yet he sighed in great anguish and asked the maiden serving him to let him sleep. As he had dismissed her, she returned to her mistress, who was, like Guigemar, affected by the ardor which kindled within her heart.